Okay, so we've just started recording and welcome everybody to our group coaching session on meal plans or on logging those meal plans and food journaling as a whole. Three coaches with you today, so lots of sort of different input on what this food journaling can look like. And before we kind of get into, we didn't do any kind of panel discussion on this or what have you, because I mean, really the guts of food journaling is you get your phone or you get a piece of paper and a pen and you write down or you take pictures of your food. I mean, it's one of the simplest habits of all, but it's also for a lot of people one of the most challenging habits of all because it can bring up some resistance. Because there's just this amazing part of us that just goes, I don't want to see that, because we know that if you're going to commit to writing it down or to taking pictures, the truth will out. So it's an excellent habit for that reason, but it can also be a little bit on the challenging side for that reason. So before we get into sort of some examples, I just want to open the floor, welcome all of you, of course, and just see if so far what your experience has been with this habit of logging your food intake, what correlations you've seen, if any, and if you have one you'd like to share. Yeah, we kind of had a sneaky hunch that might happen. Sorry, was somebody going to say something?
Yeah, sorry, this is Diana. I'll start.
Yay, Diana, good for you.
Let me see. I have a phone app. I think it's the yellow one that everybody uses, which like Lose It or something like that. I forget the name of it. And when you said it brings out resistance, I had to smile because, yeah, I feel like I've been logging my food forever. It is probably entirely true that I don't log everything, which is why I'm here. But just when I saw that as the habit, I just thought, oh God, I'm going to have to get over my initial feeling of revulsion for doing this again, because this is one of those things that, like I said, I feel like I've been doing forever. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not paying attention. I think one of the great things about this whole process is you guys are really forcing us to pay attention, which is something that I've never done. So now I'm hopeful. Maybe logging will help this time. I don't know. So that's my experience.
And what have you found so far?
What in what sense?
In the food logging, has anything sort of come to light that you were not expecting?
Nothing yet. My goal with regards to the food logging right now is trying to identify what is causing me so many migraine headaches. I've been off the grid for like the last 3 weeks because I generally get headaches around my menstrual cycle, and this month was the first month that I had gone to a neurologist. He gave me some medication. I was really excited, and then this headache has been chasing me every day since then. And I just got a note from Jen who had suggested that I start eliminating food, and I know that's what I have to do. And I think that logging is going to help me with that. I suspect that the problem is dairy. And that is also I've also discovered in the last few weeks that is a red light food for me. I avoided making that decision because I love it, and it's pretty much one of the few things that I like in food anymore. Like I feel like I'm getting to that point where like I have to get rid of everything that I like, and life is becoming this like horrible misery of just shoving tasteless food down my mouth so that I can survive for the next day. So I'm kind of in that like cranky place.
Diana, you said migraine, and then you said around your menstrual cycle, and I almost jumped through the screen because that has been my experience since about the time I turned 40. Wow. And I went through exactly what you're saying, that the first day of my menstrual cycle, I would get, what I didn't know was a migraine. I would get really sick. I would vomit. I would have GI issues. I wound up, going to a naturopath, and she said, Pam, that's a migraine. I was like, whoa, really? I had no idea. And I was violently ill. Anybody who's worked with me for a while has learned that there are days that I don't come to meetings or I don't interact because basically I'm in bed all day. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Mine have gotten incredibly better. They're not completely gone, but they've gotten a lot better since I started eating a plant-based diet. It's not going to work for everybody. That's worked for me. But honestly, I think the linchpin on that was dairy, because I stopped eating dairy. Because dairy is really inflammatory for a lot of people. A lot of people don't have the enzyme to manage it well. So that's one of the things that really helped me. And I actually did an elimination diet to try to get to that point. But everybody's experience is different. Irene, I'd love your thoughts on this. Irene is an assistant coach who's also a registered dietitian. So I'd love to hear your two cents here.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. And it is such a tricky one. It's sometimes it feels like trying to find a needle in a haystack with these things, right? And logging is really one of those ways that you can try to capture patterns. I was actually thinking as you were talking, there's a great app called, and I feel like it's called Migraine Buddy. I might need to look it up, but it allows you to capture some of the common pieces of migraine, the common migraine symptoms alongside some of the things like food or drink or a menstrual cycle or those other pieces that can affect migraines. But I think Pam's bang on, like the reason a lot of medical professionals have a hard time helping you sort through it is because it's tricky, and really it's so individual that if you can do the logging and then have some guidance to kind of evaluate it, you may be able to have those things come out. And in my experience with that sort of thing, a lot of times if you have a gut feeling, like you've sort of said, I think it might be blank, there's a good chance that that's probably a good place to start. Because that you may have, subconsciously somewhere identified a pattern for yourself. And sometimes you haven't, and you do it kind of with your scientist hat on and do an experiment. And if things come out that allow you to realize, I'm noticing an improvement, then you get to play the reality card and the honesty card and make a decision, right?
Right.
So, but it sounds like you're starting along the right path with it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I found the app online, so I'll definitely download that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And have no fear, there is lots of great food on the other side of dairy, including great nut-based cheeses. Like really.
Yeah, I was always the kind of person that I remember when people started coming out with all the food allergies. I remember saying, if I ever get to the point where I'm allergic to ice cream, somebody shoot me. So. It's just
hopefully nobody's going to take you seriously.
But now it's hard. With cheese is a big thing for me, and it's just it just seems like the food joys in life seem to be really tossed overboard as we get older, and I need to find a new joy in food. So
yeah, it can be done. Have total confidence that can be the case. But thank you so much for sharing your story, because you're not alone, for sure.
Thanks.
And I think too, Pam, if I can hop in for one more second, Diane, one of the things when you talk about, eliminating all of it, with a lot of these things, it's not necessarily that you have to eliminate all of it. Sometimes you do, but sometimes it's more of this threshold concept where, you can eat up to a certain point, and then you hit the top of your threshold level and you get symptoms. So same with IBS types of things and GI types of things. Sometimes these things, like a trigger for a migraine, it doesn't mean like if you have 1 ounce of dairy, you're in trouble. For some people, it's if I have cheese and then I have some, more cheese with lunch, and I have some milk, and then I have some ice cream, and the ice cream puts you over the threshold, and you're like, darn it, the ice cream's out. And it may have been the accumulation of all of those foods that are kind of problematic for you over the course of the day. So maybe if the cheese gets cleared out, and then, you're able to enjoy a small amount of ice cream and not bring on a migraine, you can kind of, again, that's another place to play around with. But the first step is always kind of doing the getting rid of all of it and then doing the bringing back piece to see.
Yeah.
So for elimination, I mean, I've done a Whole30 before, and my kind of inflammation symptoms didn't feel like they went away. I mean, would you guys just recommend, like, what kind of time period are we talking with regards to elimination?
Yeah, we could probably spend a whole call on elimination. Maybe we can touch base like outside of the call. So I can give you some guidance on that, or I know Jenny's done it as well and can give you some guidance too. And PN has a good resource around elimination specifically as well. Yeah, so, but it's usually a few weeks. So usually, 3 to 4 weeks is kind of the minimum amount of time you want to really clear it out to see, to give yourself a true baseline before you start playing around and adding things back in.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Diana.
Yeah, we can definitely we can touch base about that, Diana. Like, no problem.
There's a lesson coming up this week too, food and feelings, on Thursday, I believe. So we'll talk a little bit more about intolerances and allergies and things like that.
And kind of a good sidebar on that is sometimes when you eliminate things that make you feel really crummy, when you might not want to add them back in because all of a sudden you feel so good. It's like, oh, I didn't know I could feel this great. So why do I want to even chance adding that thing back in? It varies from person to person, but a lot of times when people do elimination diets, and this will probably be the last time we touch on this, they sometimes want to stay on this really restrictive diet because they haven't felt like this for so many years or ever. And then it's like, well, no, you don't really want to cut out all of these things. You do want to add some of them back, but it can be quite a discovery to actually feel really well again. So that's kind of cool. So as we went through that, did anything come up for anybody else? I mean, that was a great sort of look at one of the things that a food log can show you. Anybody else got either a food log they'd like to get guidance on or to share, or anything sort of around that? Okay. How about I read you a true life client from several years ago, food log, just 2 days. And then I would really like it if everybody could sort of give feedback, kind of oh, this was good, or that could be tweaked, or there's a gap with such and such. So as I read through, just sort of take note mentally or write down what kind of crosses your mind when you hear this, because this is real. This wasn't made up. Coffee with cream and stevia, steel cut oatmeal with protein powder, almond milk, blueberries, and chia seeds. Lunch, black bean soup, followed by fruit cobbler and vanilla ice cream. A snack in the afternoon of some protein and an apple. Dinner of salad, taco meat, black beans, cheese, avocado, tomatoes, and a creamy dressing. And an hour after dinner, a dark chocolate ice cream bar. So that's day 1. And day 2, scroll up. Coffee with cream and stevia, half a serving of steel cut oats with protein powder, almond milk, blueberries, and some seeds. And then a few hours later, the remaining half of that breakfast. And then at noon, more soup. 1:30, apple and some protein. 2 o'clock, a square of chocolate. 4:30, salad, chicken, avocado, tomatoes, some seeds, some cheese, some olive oil. And then at 9 p.m., a small hot fudge sundae. Okay, so there's 2 days of a typical food journal. So feedback. Oh, Teresa said, I found out I snack a lot. Try not to fill up on meals. I'm confused. Okay, we'll certainly look at that because that actually relates to this food log as well. Hey, Lori.
Hi. So I was going to say, I felt having a half fudge sundae at 9 o'clock, certainly my option would be to go to bed. If you're hungry at 9 o'clock, there's something that you did maybe at dinner that you could have had more protein or something. But really, if I'm getting to the point where I have to have something at 9 o'clock, that's a red light to me in itself.
Okay, great feedback. Anybody else? What were your thoughts in hearing that? Suk, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Sure can.
Perfect. One of the thoughts I had as you were going through that story is maybe something else is happening during the day that's leading to kind of that sugar craving at the 9 p.m. Time slot. The reason I say that is sometimes I notice that with myself. I could be eating really well in the morning and afternoon, but that 3 p.m. kind of time slot hits and things start going downhill. And if I ever get to 9 p.m. and I'm craving something, it's usually for something sweet. So I'd be keen to understand how to proactively change something earlier in the day, because I think that has an impact.
Excellent feedback. Thank you. Anybody else?
Definitely sounds like a extras kind of thing going on there. Lots of little extras.
Back in my Weight Watchers days, they were called BLTs, bites, licks, and tastes.
Oh.
But it's a good reminder, Weight Watchers did teach me something. It's really true that those kind of things add up in a really big way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Jenny, what did you think?
I was kind of wondering if, how much smart carbohydrate she was eating throughout her day. I saw them at breakfast with the oatmeal, but with the salad and lots of, other vegetable carbohydrates maybe. But I saw a number of, healthy fats in there. But by dinner and all of that, I was wondering about the smart carbs.
Yeah, I love that observation too, because that hangs on to what Suk said about what's happening earlier in the day that makes you want to eat something later in the day. And certainly what I've seen over my years in coaching is the women who restrict smart carbs are the ones that have the most sugar cravings, because it's like they're not getting those quality carbohydrates in earlier meals, so they're going to find it somewhere. And the other thing that certainly struck me with this is at 9 o'clock at night, people are generally not eating because they're hungry. A lot of the time, they're eating because they're going out, they're doing something social, they're watching TV, and when we watch TV, we eat something. There's these sort of correlations that we have. So oftentimes it's more habitual than actual hunger, right? Because if it's actually hunger, you'd be happy to have an apple and a piece of cheese, or an apple and some nut butter or something like that. But generally speaking, and certainly in the food logs that I see, that's not what people eat in the evenings. And I think the stat is something like 80% of calories are consumed after 6 p.m. It's pretty staggering. I can't remember the exact number, so don't quote me on that. But it's that the vast majority of food is consumed late in the day. Now, this particular one was not indicative of that. There was breakfast and there was lunch, but there was lots of in-betweens. So it's kind of an interesting nod. What did you see, Irene?
I was wanted to share a couple of tips.
Good.
About evaluating these food records, because I think certainly reading it or hearing you read it, you pick up on things. When you have your own page in front of you, these guys can be your best friend. So I only have two with me right now, but I would have one for each group. So a green one for my veggies, a yellow one for my smart carbs, one for your protein foods and one for your fats, and highlight those throughout your page. And suddenly some patterns can really jump out at you. And that's really, I think, one of the biggest value. I think the first biggest value of food records, like you talked about in the beginning, Pam, is the fact that you're pausing to write it down while you're doing the food record. That's the number one most valuable thing, in the moment. But then when you're reviewing it, to try to identify patterns, bigger patterns, instead of getting too focused in on one or two particular foods, and doing something like highlighting can really help you to see those patterns jump out at you. Another thing that can be helpful as you're talking about when in the day you have your food and that distribution of food throughout the day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this any justice over the video here, but I would do something like taking a piece of paper, if you guys can see this here.
Yep.
And almost draw like a timeline. Or I actually have a document I might be able to share that I've created a week's worth of these. And on that line, you start with, this is when I wake up, and this is when I fall asleep, and all of these times I'm not eating because I'm sleeping. And then you have this window of time in the middle of the day when your meals happen. And you can use a marking system to say, you know, each line is, so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, so on throughout your day. And you can circle and mark when in the day those meals are, and you can identify what snacks. You can use bigger, you know, a bigger visual marker for what's a meal. And then when you have a week's worth of these lines, again, you can catch patterns to say, like you were saying, it's so often that we have all of these markings towards the end of the day. So they show up on that side of the page. So it's a couple of these kind of little tricks I think are really helpful. And that's what makes you aware of those pieces that you're like, geez, yeah, I am doing X, and what can I do about this now? So, yeah, the other thing that jumped out at me when you're asking specifically about this case, like I did hear a lot of fruits and vegetables and things. And sometimes we focus in so much on what's wrong that we miss focusing in on, you know, there's some good stuff going on there, and how is that happening, and how can this person do more? How can I do more of that? If that were my food record, like, all right, I'm doing pretty well with my veggies, and you know, what allows me to get that at lunch, and how can I do more of that at other times in the day, that kind of thing.
That's such a great point. I think we are our own worst critics. And I think that's one of the reasons that doing a food journal is very difficult for people, because you're like, I'm going to look at this and it's going to make me feel bad. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to think I'm a bad person because I had a chocolate bar. No, it's not. Everybody's food journal, no matter how pristine, and I tell you, I've had this conversation with John Berardi. He's an ice cream fanatic. If he has ice cream in his house, he eats it. So even the highest up on the food chain, no pun intended, will, you know, eat these foods that aren't necessarily, you know, the best. Because we eat food. We don't eat macronutrients. We eat food, and it contains all kinds of wonderful things, and sometimes it contains all kinds of maybe not so wonderful things, but you know, there's all kinds of reasons, and it's not just for fuel. I don't know too many people who just see food as, oh gosh, I've got to eat now because otherwise it'll, you know, I might be hungry and I want to deal with that. There's a lot more to it than that.
For sure. And we just listened to you rhyme off, you know, whole grain steel cut oats and apples and beans, and all of us went, oh, she had a chocolate bar, right? And that's what we do to ourselves too. We, you know, the finger wagging comes out, and that mean girl in our head can come out and be like, ah ha ha, like it negates all that good stuff, because that one, you know, there's a blemish on the food record. And try to open the scope when you're evaluating your food record. So all of those good points get included in the evaluation too. And then if you need to go into the other, you know, the things that aren't working, go there, but allow yourself, you know, that kind of self-compassion to be like, yeah, there's some good stuff going on here too.
So good. Yeah, absolutely. Self-compassion has to be sort of at the forefront with all of these things. And if we kind of lose that, then there's going to be a bit of a concern with how we're evaluating ourselves. I've said to clients oftentimes, would you say that to your daughter or to your best friend? And God forbid if somebody would ever speak to their daughter the way we speak to ourselves sometimes, they would always say, no, I would never speak to my child or my husband or, you know, my best friend that way. Well, it all begins with you, right? So that's such a good point, to look at the good and not just pick out the things that aren't so good. Great point. Jessica, what are your thoughts on this whole conversation?
Yeah, I thought that was really an important part of it because I think it's so good to track the patterns of the good things that you're doing because like Irene said, like you can beef up the good if you know what those look like too. And so particularly with this person who started with a really good breakfast, that's a good indicator that she knows what choices are feel good, how can she pull that into the rest of her day? And maybe looking at those smart carbs too, a little closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always. Anybody have any thoughts at this point before we kind of move on? Anything that's kind of jumped out? Everybody's here to just hang out and listen today.
Well, maybe I can go through. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sue.
One of the things I've really noticed by food journaling is how important the rest of the habits are. So having it all come together and the importance of it. So one thing would be, my food is dependent on the type of people I'm around. There's certain people in my family that just don't eat healthy, and when I'm around them, I'm less likely to follow my habits. So that's one example. The other one would be the habit around planning your meals. So I've come to the realization that even though I was trying to plan my meals 1 or 2 days in advance, I actually need to do it 3 or 4 days in advance to allow me a buffer, because when I get really stressed out, that 1 or 2 day buffer that I had actually goes to hell fairly quickly, and then I get into a panic state and I'm like, okay, I got to be more proactive when it comes to this. So I think the importance of all of these habits coming together is really coming out quite strongly in the food journal that I'm tracking, at least on my end.
Yeah, I would concur with that. What are your thoughts on what Sue just said, Jenny?
Yeah, I think that like tracking more than just getting outside the box and not just using your food journal to write down what you ate and when, but writing down other things. Like for me, I tend to, thoughts, emotions, feelings, behaviors, all throughout the day I find are invaluable if I'm food logging, because I might know that I ate XYZ, but why did I eat XYZ? And even if I don't really know, maybe I could try to identify what the feeling is, if it's
for
just, I'm actually for the pattern. Yeah. And, if I'm physically hungry, because I just worked out, great. But if I'm eating, I don't even know what, because, I don't know, I'm sad, I'm disappointed, my husband went out, or watching TV, I think adding extra, any tiny little bit of information is above and beyond just with the what you ate is helpful.
I have one. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just had another question. This is for the coaches. Like, as we move along the continuum of getting kind of better at the eating habits, like one of the things I'm noticing is that I'm starting to get into a schedule where I'll want food every 3 or 4 hours. And if I'm doing the right portions of protein, carbs, healthy fats, that can actually become quite predictable. I think I'm noticing this more now because I have a 3-month at home. And when he breastfeeds, like an hour later, I'll be hungry. And so because he's feeding every 3 hours, then I'll want to feed, in a 3-hour interval, but 1 hour delayed. And I'm wondering if that's normal or if that's kind of heading in the right direction.
As a woman who breastfed 6 children, yes, that's very normal. Your caloric needs go up substantially when you're nursing. It's even higher than when you're pregnant. So your body is responsible for the feeding of a person. So yeah, of course, your hunger is a good indicator. But when you're nursing, you don't need to think about 80% full really as much.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to eat until you're fully satisfied. Not like lie down on the couch and under your pants satisfied necessarily.
Yeah, you had given me that tip before, so I'd gone easier on the 80% and just making sure I'm getting the calories.
Yeah. And as long as you're eating really good foods that are supportive for you and for your son, and, you're not finding there's anything you eat that comes through your milk and is irritating him, you're probably fine. Some women lose a lot of weight when they're breastfeeding, and some don't lose it until after they stop breastfeeding. It's so individual from person to person. I have 2 daughters who had babies 2 months apart, and they are on the complete opposite ends of that spectrum. The one was back to her pre-pregnancy weight, like within like a week. Her older sister.
Mine was within 3 weeks, and I've held steady for the last couple of weeks. But I'm certainly noticing differences in appetite.
Yeah. And that's okay. Always goes back to your body is your truth. As KSD has so brilliantly stated, your body knows what it needs. We're just not always really great at listening because we hear, oh no, I need cake or whatever. And your body is requesting something. So taking the time to tune in and really kind of listen to what that is really key.
Okay.
What struck me when sort of this whole conversation is going on about sort of all those extras that creep in, I went to a conference a few years ago it was at a fitness conference, and I went to the nutrition session, and there were Hershey's Kisses on all the seats. Irene knows this one. I can tell by your face. And of course, everybody goes in and goes, ooh, chocolate, and sits down and eats. And then the dietitian that led the session said, how many of you were planning on eating a piece of chocolate today? And of course, we're all like, oh, no, we weren't. And then her point was that things like that happen all the time, where you're not planning on something, but, oh, look at it, just showed up. You know, your husband or your kids or your friends show up with, baked goods or whatever. That wasn't in your plan, but all of a sudden it's in front of you and it's interesting. So sometimes it's, having that increased awareness. Did I plan for this? No. Do I really want it? I'm going to decide if I want it. And if I do, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to enjoy it sitting with a plate at a table as opposed to hiding in the closet or whatever, which happens. So just a nod to that which we're not expecting to have, and it comes up because that is really far more common than we sometimes think.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point, Pam, because like no matter what happens, if the food, like some stuff just shows up, but we always have a choice on whether or not we put that stuff in our mouth and eat it. And sometimes the choice might be, heck yes, I do want the chocolate, the whatever that I didn't expect, but hey, yes, maybe I really do want it. And then I can choose to have it, but I can also choose to be okay with that decision afterwards and not beat myself up over it.
Yeah, definitely part of the equation. Most definitely. I want to circle back here to Teresa's comment about snacking but trying not to fill up on meals. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Teresa? Because that's a really good point.
Yes. So before I started this program, I had a nutritionist that put me on really strict quantities of food to eat, get more protein. I have terrible hot flashes at night when I sleep. So more protein through the day was her solution, but I was literally gagging down protein to try, measure it and then try to eat it. So, and then I gained 20 pounds. I like the hunger is not an emergency and eating till you're 80% full, but I find toward the end of the day, I am hungry. I try to eat the protein, the carb, and the fat if I'm going to snack. But, I don't know. I wonder, I'm trying to listen to my body and learn about my body. So I'm wondering if maybe the snacking is just something I need to experience right now because I need to stick with the what's 80% full. That's my question. Okay.
Jess or Jenny, do you want to address that?
So I'm trying to understand the question. So it sounds like you are noticing snacking in between meals, but
yeah, I do great at breakfast and lunch, and then sort of about 4 o'clock until 9 o'clock, I'm snacking.
Okay. What time is, if you start snacking at 4, Teresa, what time is dinner typically?
Usually around 6:30 or 7.
Okay, so that's still, and what time was lunch?
12:30.
So you wouldn't, it wouldn't be unusual to go from 12 o'clock. If for me, if I had a meal at 12 o'clock and didn't eat my dinner till 6:30 or 7 o'clock, yeah, I'm probably going to be hungry and physically hungry at like late afternoon. In which case I'd say, go ahead and have your snack.
Okay. So I guess inherent snacks aren't inherently bad.
Oh, heavens,
No.
no.
Look at the label. You could call it a snack, or you could just call it you could call it breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner, or you could call it meal 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Okay.
Sometimes just calling it a mini meal is helpful to then say, okay, in this smaller meal, it's not like one of my 3 squares. In this smaller meal, am I getting protein, smart carbs, healthy fats, and fruits or vegetables? You might not even need all of those components because it's not as big a meal, but at least have a nod to one of them. Whereas if you were to have what a typical snack might be, like a bag of chips and a pop or something like that, that doesn't sort of fit into any of those categories. Not to say it can never fit in, but if it's a daily thing, it's a little bit different.
Okay, yeah, I saw on the one of the forms that it had meal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and so I was like, oh, I'll just count it as a meal.
Yeah.
And some days you might find you eat, I don't know, 4 meals. Some days maybe it's 5. I know for me, some days I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm in bed later. So for me, 4 meals in a day, I might need that 5th meal or that 6th meal, depending on what's going on in my day. So I don't think there's a right or wrong number, just what's better for you. And it might change from day to day.
Okay. I also found that calling it meal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is better than just thinking about it as meals and snacks. Particularly because I was like you, Teresa. I was starting to snack quite a bit between the 3 and then even after dinner, because I was low on sugar and my body was just craving sugar, or what I thought was sugar. And what I'm starting to realize is that it's actually, I'm not getting enough smart carbs. Like I'll do well with the breakfast and lunch, but after that, I haven't been focused on it as much.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I looked at a food journal that a client sent me this week, and she said that she was really, really tired. But I looked at the food journal the day before of when she was really tired, and there was a cake in there, and then there was another highly processed food in that day. So it's finding these, to me, that's an obvious correlation, but might not be an obvious correlation for everybody. You know, if you eat foods that are highly processed or really high in sugar, your body's going to react. In the moment, it might react by going yum, yum. But later on, when you get a blood sugar drop, it might not be feeling quite so outstanding.
Yeah. And then you're definitely hungry again.
Yeah.
I've found after I have a meal, a lot of times I inherently just want something sweet, but I keep mints at my desk at work, and I'll take just 1 mint, either a very pungent peppermint or sometimes cinnamon, and that just takes away that need to have something sweet. It actually just curbs it completely, and it distracts me enough that I go on with my business.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Mint tea is good for that too. I like that. It's great.
Actually, tea as a whole is a really actually great option, because you can get all these amazing flavors now, like mint chocolate or rhubarb or strawberry fiesta, all these really lovely sweet flavors, and you don't have to add anything to them. And it can just, again, there you go, Jess has got hers.
Raspberry pea.
So sometimes it's just finding those
I drink
little
gallon, buckets of tea.
Yeah. Totally.
We just recently got David's tea here.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Every one of those ones you just mentioned, I have.
I have a massive tea caddy full of David's tea. I can't go into the store. I come out with like $50 worth of tea and go.
No, it's yeah.
That is,
and if you're looking to try, and David's tea.
Go ahead.
David's tea in particular right now, seasonally, David's tea has an advent calendar. It's like 24 days of tea. If you're looking to try, it's hard to come. Like I would suggest if you want to try it, try to find it now, because they usually sell out. But if you want to try some different teas, and you have a David's tea, it's a fun way to do it.
We got one last year, and my son and I would have one each morning, and he would take his to school and text me his thoughts on the tea. This one was a winner. I would get this one again, or whatever. This one had a nice earthy flavor. It was actually a fun thing to do with a kid, and it was a nice way, like Jenny says, to try the tea. It was awesome. Actually, I keep thinking I should go and buy the Advent calendar again. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
How about we do one more food journal? What do you think?
I have one if you want me to pop it on the screen.
Sure.
I think I know how to do this. All right. Can you all see that? It's pretty small. Okay, so this is from a former client. So if you want to just take a look through here. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Does anyone have any thoughts on this particular food log, like what you notice?
Coaches can't go first, so you ladies get to jump to it. You're on the phone, Nicole or Michelle. Can you see? I guess you can't see anything, correct?
No, I can see everything.
Oh, okay. Well, I can read some.
I'm noticing just looking through this, looks like not quite enough protein. And scrolling towards the end of the week, I see like 2 bagels right in a row. So that tells me that the bagel isn't really doing much for this person, filling them up, except for making them hungry for another bagel, which is what happens when I eat them. So I can completely understand that. Yeah, like the Thursday 626.
So what we're looking at, Michelle, is meal 1 was protein and almond milk with some almond slivers. Meal 2 was a gluten-free bagel with butter and amino energy. I guess that's a drink. Meal 3 was another bagel with butter. Meal 4 was 2 tacos, sort of typical beef tacos. Meal 5 was limeade Oreos. So that's kind of fairly typical of this particular food journal.
Okay.
So hearing that, I was just going to say, hearing that, kind of what stands out. I mean, I think all of us can go, oh, there's lots of ice cream or things like that, but what else kind of stands out there?
There doesn't seem to be enough vegetables and fruit.
Yep.
Also, it seems like there's a lot of time between the first meal and the second meal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can even see on Monday, I think the first meal was at 2:30. Quite a bit of time from the morning to afternoon too.
But again, looking at correlations, the night before was lots of chips. Like lots is what I think of lots as somebody else's lots might be different, but assuming that that was a great deal, you're not going to wake up going, wow, I'm really hungry this morning because of the content of lots of chips, like the fat content and so on.
I see a fair amount of like processed and quick, almost convenience food, like trail mix. Not a lot of cooking going on, I would say.
Yeah.
Except for the mug cookie.
Yeah, I guess you got the
Some grilled chicken and mashed potatoes.
I also noticed at the beginning of the week, quite a bit of Diet Coke in there. The reason this one sticks out for me is my husband does that a lot, so I'm kind of curious if that's just because of need of sugar or
some people drink Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi for the caffeine if they don't like coffee, for example. And a lot of people drink it because of, they like the soda, the pop. But your body just thinks sugar, so continues to crave sugary things, regardless of the fact that there's no calories in Diet Coke, right?
Yeah, we like to use the term you're training your sweet tooth. So you're training it to want that flavor by using the diet beverages because it's quite sweet. So then sometimes, you're trying to make a good choice, perhaps moving from a regular Coke and the sugar in there to a diet. And sometimes it can backfire a little bit if you end up wanting more sweets. So, but that's an individual thing to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also struck by the seaweed rice cake in the middle with all the other choices. That one just seems a little out of place. So obviously this person has food available to them that are less, not ice cream, not lots of chips, not, but they're choosing to maybe not make the best choices.
That's a really good observation.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I'm going to tell you, if there's ice cream and there's a seaweed rice cake, my choice is usually not going to be the seaweed rice cake.
I didn't know you could buy such thing as a seaweed rice cake. I just learned something new. I thought it was interesting to note all of the sort of processed carbs in this food journal, but yet gluten-free bagels. Like, why gluten-free? I think there's a misconception out there that gluten-free means healthy, and that is absolutely not the truth. If somebody has celiac disease, definitely you have to eat gluten-free. Some people have gluten intolerances or real sensitivities. That's different. But you can't I'm not sure what the choice of a gluten-free bagel would be, the morning after a mug cookie made with, actually there was no gluten in that, but all the other things, like the turkey club from a restaurant would have, regular bread and so forth. So that was just kind of something I picked out there. Pizza. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed from this food journal is, like, in the exercise column, it always says none. So I'm wondering if there's a correlation between not exercising and then, wanting to eat bad food. It's probably a very general
Yep, I didn't put the
comment.
Journal here, but yeah, you do see exercise was not included for basically the entirety of the week. So that can make a difference and an impact too for some people.
Well, sure, because most people, if you go to the gym or wherever you exercise and you have a good workout, you're less likely to want to indulge in foods that are not supportive of your goals.
Pam, just a question there. I'm breastfeeding and I've kind of lost quite a bit of weight already. I haven't really been focused on workouts, but I'm wondering whether or not I need to actually incorporate some of that back in to help me with balancing the rest of my diet. That's something you would recommend?
Well, as somebody who's a personal trainer, my answer is kind of inevitably going to be yes, that you want to exercise. And exercise is not for weight loss. It can help in weight loss, but it's really for so much more than that, right? So for any kind of body recomposition or for sleeping better, for feeling better overall, for reducing any kind of depressive issues, there's just this multitude of reasons that exercise is so amazing for you. So yeah, I would encourage you to do something. It doesn't have to be the full workouts if you don't feel like you're quite there yet, but even getting out and walking with the baby and all kinds of things like that is always a good idea. It just helps in so many things.
Yeah, I'm noticing that it's helping me with moods in a positive way when I do actually get it in, because I was doing like 3 or 4 times a week before, and now it's being a little bit on the wayside. But it's not for losing weight. It's more for just the mental stability that comes with it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Always a nod to exercise, unless you're injured, and even then, I've had injuries and done
workarounds, and I think much of the time you can. You were going to say something, Irene?
Yeah, just about the food record. I was going to just make kind of a general comment. Like my yellow is my carb color. And whenever there's a lot of yellow on the page, there's something else to take a look at. And does anybody know what that connection might be with the carb cravings and another part of wellness? You may notice this if you tune in. Yeah, tired, right. Your sleep. So, so many times I've found if we can address the sleep quality, the yellow goes down without any particular effort on bringing that down. So that's when to tune into a little bit and see if that's a thing for you. So on a day that you know you're feeling really tired, if you can make a little note of that on your food journal, and then you may see that there's more of those carbohydrate foods. And a lot of times it's not the smart carb foods, right, that we're going for. But you may see that those things go up on those days, which is just a correlation that gives you a space to be able to make some changes if you want to do that too.
That's a good note there. Because
I love the idea of the colors.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And the next piece you can do with the colors is once you've highlighted, you can almost do just like tally form if you want to find out like how many servings I'm getting of each of these things. So you count up your yellow things, right? Tally, tally, tally over the course of the day. And you can do, and it's not going to be exact, but it's giving you a rough idea. Am I getting, and there were a lot of comments on the last food record about the protein. Well, at a glance, you can make a general assumption about it, but then to actually do a quick tally gives you just a little bit more information to say, okay, how many protein servings am I actually getting when I do a count here? And then again, it gives you that place for a little bit more, right? So maybe I'm getting, 3 in the day and I want to try to add 1 more somewhere and that kind of thing. So that tally can help. With the food record evaluation. So you can look at the time and the spacing of meals, then you can move into kind of using the highlighting or some kind of visual to look at what's in my meals, and then you can tune into kind of that other level to look at what other things might be influencing, like Pam's commented about, go back to the night before or look at your sleep or those other things we've talked about. Those are kind of the layers you can go through evaluating your record and finding places to make changes,
That's so good. And that brings me all the way back to the acronym HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. When you're starting to crave something, those are 4 things you can look at, and oftentimes it's one of them. It should almost be HALT B, because bored is another one that's really common.
Yes.
It's like, well, I'm going to have a party. And I think it's Dr. Phil. It says party. You want a party in your mouth. I'm bored, so I need to eat something. You're not hungry. You're not addressing any kind of nutritional need. It's just like, I need to do something, and food becomes an event. Yeah. So HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
What was lonely? Okay.
Yeah.
I had a clarifying question for Coach Irene.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I cut you off?
No, that's fine.
Coach, you were mentioning that on days where you have like carbohydrates or a lot of carbohydrates, you could be tired. Is that the same as eating the smart carbohydrates as well, as opposed to processed carbohydrates? Because I'm trying to increase my smart carbohydrates, and I'm wondering if I go too far, if I would expect to be more tired.
Oh, so the correlation doesn't necessarily go. So what we're looking at is if you are tired. So let's say you've had a night where you're up with your little one a million times and you have very low sleep. That next day, you may find that you're eating more carbohydrates or feeling like you want to eat more carbohydrates. So that's kind of the way that correlation works. Now, Pam talked earlier about if you have more of the sugary foods, you can end up feeling kind of draggy and tired too. That's kind of a little bit of a different, it's a cycle. They are all connected, but the piece we're looking at is if you're really tired, we know that when you're fatigued, you're more likely to crave more of those carbohydrates. And then if you look at your food record, that might mean you actually end up eating more of those carbohydrates, right? Does
And
that make sense?
The strategy there is just have the smart carbohydrates, right?
Yeah, certainly choosing the smart carbs is a better option than going to the sugary carbs, which is probably what you're wanting. They're like, you want a donut or something, right? But choosing the smart carbs for sure. And then sometimes just noticing and naming it like, I'm tired today. This is going to be a carby craving day. And what am I going to do about that? Right? Like you just kind of step into the reality of what's going on. And then that awareness you, like Jenny was talking about, that option of choice, right? We all have a choice, but we don't have a choice if we're not aware of what's going on. So that's kind of the first step that the food record lets you do, to be aware, and then you can call it out, and then you have the opportunity to make a choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it always comes back to awareness. Having some mindfulness, taking a few minutes before we eat something that, where you've got sort of the devil on your shoulder and the angel on your shoulder. Oh, you shouldn't eat that. You shouldn't eat that. Don't eat it. And I was like, well, I want that. When you've got that going on, even just taking a minute to sit down and say, do I really want it? If I want it, then I'm going to have it, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to completely enjoy it instead of scarfing it down in some kind of a shameful way. So that's what we want to avoid, because there's nothing shameful about food. It's just a matter of balancing out the things that you like with the things that like you and going from there. So that takes us to the top of the hour. I can't believe that went pretty fast. Any brief last comments?
I actually wanted to know how I could get in touch with you, Pam, to talk about working out with migraines.
Okay. Who's your coach?
Jen.
Okay. I will work through Jen and get that for you.
Okay. I just wanted to know how you dealt with it, because that tends to be a big stumbling block for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. How often are you getting them?
At least once a month. Sometimes they last about 6 to 7 days. This month has been unusual, I think, but I'm trying to track those as well so that I can figure out what the pattern is. Yeah,
we'll dig into it a bit, but yeah, I feel your pain. It's not a picnic. Lucky for me, mine have never lasted that long. I'm sorry. That's awful. Anyway, thank you everybody so much for being on the call. Super appreciate it. And hopefully you got some tips that you can take away and use. And hopefully we'll see you the next time out. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, ladies.